Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Morning Devo with Bo-O. Hope you're doing good. It's great to see Tamara and Bob already in the house, ready to go. Let me put my camera a little bit down. I noticed it's a little high this AM, but let's do it like that. Hey, that's a little better. Hey, I sound like a Canadian, right? Hey, that's because, my family's originally from Maine. So sometimes maybe some of that Canadian comes out of me. And they were up in Quebec. So anyway, good morning and welcome to Tina. We're going to be in Exodus chapter 2 today. And my name is Bo, if you don't know. And you could always check out the morning devos on the archive channel at my YouTube channel. There they all are. And man, we are certainly making our way now through the Bible. Exodus chapter 2, super cool area and pretty popular scripture. But there's some cool things we can get from it this morning. Just focus our mind a little bit on the Lord. And that's really what these devos are about. It's about starting our day kind of on the right track, getting it going with our minds focused on God's word and not maybe our own stuff, right off the bat. So let's get into it. About this time, a man and woman from the tribe of Levi got married. So remember, Levi was one of the brothers of Joseph. And remember, this is a long time after Joseph dies and all of his brothers like Levi. So this is around 200 years after, just so you get a good timeline of kind of when this is going on. Things are happening kind of rapidly, kind of quick. The narratives definitely aren't like day to day, if you will. Here you have Levi, this couple getting married, and remember the Israelites, man, they're fertile and they're just growing by leaps and bounds, man, just taking over the hood, if you will, and the Pharaoh's gone mad with fear and has put the Hebrew people in a slave position, in a slave relationship with now the state. And so the propaganda machine of Egypt is going full force on just how bad those Hebrews are. And everybody, of course, buys into it because people tend to buy into the ruling class. You know, that's kind of how it goes. And they believe them. So we get this wonderful narrative here. Levi, a man and a woman, get married. And the woman becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son. And she saw that this was a special baby and kept him hidden for 3 months. Yeah, some versions say the baby was beautiful. Some say like fair, goody is a word that's used in the Old King James Bible that describes this baby. She had a baby and she said, man, this baby's awesome. And hopefully many people do that when they have a child. And when she could no longer hide him, she got a basket made of papyrus reeds and waterproofed it with tar and pitch. She put the baby in the basket and laid it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile River. The baby's sister then stood at a distance watching to see what would happen to him. Now, this is really an interesting situation. The Pharaoh has put out an edict, and it was to kill all the baby boys of the Hebrews. And the Pharaoh tried to use the midwives and say, hey, if a Hebrew woman is going to have a baby, then get there, and if that is a male child, throw that child into the Nile. Sounds pretty nasty to me. Like, why would you throw babies into a beautiful river? But obviously they had some place where they would abort these children, put them and along the Nile. And the midwives said, we ain't going to do that. They feared the Lord. And I want you to see that this woman becomes pregnant, and she also doesn't do what the Pharaoh would want her to do, which is to abort her son, to kill him, to kill the child. But instead, she places him in an ark. Now, that should move us where? Where should that move us to in our brains? To Noah, right? Noah's ark kind of thing. Yeah, that, she took care of that child, put him in a little ark, that idea of deliverance, that idea of safety. She makes a little ark for this kid. The parents have taken care of this kid for 3 months, but they can no longer do it because of the pressure from the upstairs people, from the government. And then she makes this cool little ark, and it sounds like a little ark, right? Papyrus reeds. She waterproofs it with tar and pitch, and she puts the baby in the basket, right? And she does do what Pharaoh says to do, and that is take your baby into the Nile. She just happens to build an ark for him. Isn't that cool? She's really creative. Hey, do we have any creative people in the Devo today? That you just find your mind being really creative, and artistic. And I just think it's way cool that, this woman goes and thinks about what Pharaoh said to do. Okay, take my baby, put him into the Nile. Okay, I'll put him into the Nile, but I'm gonna do something different. And yeah, she loved him. She loved him so much. And I'm a dad. I'm not a mom, but moms, man, they have some passion. And I want to tell you guys too that, don't you notice just how revolutionary this section of the Bible is? Do you notice who is opposing the ruling class? Who the narrative keeps focusing on? It's females. Isn't that interesting? It's the women, the midwives, right? They come back to Pharaoh and say, hey, these Hebrew women, they're vigorous, man. They're strong-hipped, man. They're burly women, and they give birth, man, quick, and they save the kids, right? The midwives save the children through what they say to the Pharaoh. They're not gonna kill them. Now you see this other lady this mom, right? This wife from the tribe of Levi. And she is now standing up and saying, man, no, I'm going to make an ark. My baby needs to be safe. And notice the baby's sister. Now, you guys know who Moses' sister was. I'm not going to have to tell you that. You guys probably already know who that is. But this baby's sister stood at a distance to see what was happening. Isn't that beautiful? Beautiful love and care. And God, help us to be compassionate people today, loving one another, loving our families, just in, being that kind of people. Oh, let me turn down the music too. Sorry about that. Golly. Didn't even know it was still running there in the background, but must have been cool. Good little music vibe behind my talking there. But yeah, just neat. So Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the river, and her attendants walked along the riverbank. And when the princess saw the basket among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it for her. And when the princess opened it, she saw the baby, and the little boy was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This must be one of the Hebrew children, she said. Could you imagine this princess living in the house of, Pharaoh? And, of course, she's bought into a lot of the propaganda, the machine that runs the world, of course. That's how it goes. It's all got a propaganda machine going on, man. It's trying to get people to believe things and trust them, and because they're in places of power. And think of her, and she's thinking like, oh, man, all these Hebrews are now our slaves, and they must be evil people. These Hebrews must be really bad. And also there's an edict for all the sons, the babies, the male sons to be actually killed. And God, they must be that horrible, And here she sees this baby and this little boy crying, and she feels sorry. And we know the baby's over 3 months at this time. And she says, "This must be one of the Hebrew children," she said. Then the babysitters approached the princess. "Should I go and find one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" she asked. And this was definitely a custom. And it says, "Yes, do," the princess replied. So the girl went and called the baby's mother. So very interesting set of events. It definitely shows us that God has a plan going on. But it really stems from this person's faith and courage. And, I think of that this morning too, just in reading this, is the amount of courage that it took to take your baby, make an ark, the creative idea to make the ark and put your baby in it, and then have your daughter, watch at a distance, and then your daughter get involved by potentially telling the princess that, hey, you know what, I could find a Hebrew woman for you to nurse. And she goes and runs and probably tells her mom, "Hey, Mom, guess what? This is what, the princess needs." And the mom's like, "Right on, I'm ready to go." Just a lot of courage, to be placed in these positions where death is on the line, and really, really scary place. But I love that. And I love that the Bible is so ahead of its day, and it points to the faith of these women. And gosh, I want to have a courage like that in my life, to stand up against things that need to be stood up against, and trust God with those positions that we're taking. And life was important to these people. Killing babies, it says they would not do. They feared God, it says. And that's awesome, man, that they stood like that. And so it says the baby sister approached the princess. "Should I go find one of the Hebrew women?" Yes. So isn't that cool? Miriam, you guys know her. Miriam, Moses' sister, older sister, right? And she is there the whole time just saying, hey, and she goes and she calls her mom and says, "Mom, the princess has your baby, my brother, and she wants someone to nurse that child, and she's having compassion on that child. Go to your baby." I mean, it must have been just a wild, emotional time. And so this is what happens in verse 9. "Take this baby and nurse him for me," the princess told the baby's mother. "I will pay you for your help." So the woman took her baby home and nursed him, and she gets paid. God blesses her for her courage and her faith and holding fast. So much so she gets rewarded even more. Jesus promises us this, that those who trust in him will receive 100-fold. Those who trust in Christ, even though we might be associated with the lowly one, the one who is put to death by the ruling powers of the day. But yet Jesus promised us that, hey, man, you will be paid mightily for your courage and your faith to walk with me and to trust me. And wow, what a powerful, again, picture these women are. These women are. And I keep stressing that because, here you see it so many thousands of years ago. Who are the people of faith? What is the person of faith that's coming out of the people of Israel at this moment? The narrative is these women. It's amazing. And it says, so the woman took her baby home and nursed him. She gets paid for it. Amazing. Helps sustain her life. Later, when the boy was older, his mother brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter. 2, 3 years old by now? who adopted him as her own son. The princess named him Moses. First, she explained, I lifted him up out of water. Moses' name means that, to be drawn out of that water. And so, amazing story. And it says many years later, now we jump ahead in the narrative, and it says Moses had grown up and he went out to visit his own people. So by this time, he knows, he very much is aware of his background. And he goes to the Hebrews and he saw how hard they were forced to work. During his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. After looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand. Now, what was the root of, of what was in Moses's heart? Was it justice, wanting to see justice done? Feeling bad for his people? Probably all that. Probably seeing the injustice done to them, seeing them work hard, seeing their labor. Have you ever seen anybody beaten, forced into slavery? It's just a horrible, deplorable idea, man. It freaks us out a little bit to think like that, to think that people can do that to people. But yet people can. And people's hearts are that way. And remember, the government says this is okay. This is good. That we are really helping out society by enslaving the Hebrews. Man, right? Wake up, Egyptians, right? Open up your eyes, right? To the machine and the propaganda that's going on. And Moses sees the injustice being done. He sees probably all the propaganda machine of the government of his day. He's probably disgusted by it. He sees his own affluence, his own privilege, and he sees an injustice that's being done, an incredible injustice. And he can't just sit still. And this rage and wrath just overcome him. God, help us not to have a rage and a wrath that goes ahead of you, right? That goes ahead of you, God. Let's let vengeance be yours, God, and not our own. Let's not take vengeance into our own hands. You might be mad about something this morning. You might be pretty bent about it. You might see some things that are wrong, but let's wait on the Lord to take vengeance instead of us doing it on our own. Because just like Moses, we're cut out of the same cloth, and we're going to go a little too far with it. And just as Moses looked at the slave drivers, and, he had that Bob Marley song in his mind too. He was slave driver, and he saw the atrocities of it, man. And it was hitting his heart of just how, every time he hears the crack of the whip, his blood runs cold, right? That's what quote from the Bob Marley tune. And, he, felt that blood running cold. He felt that awfulness to it. And he takes his fist and he looks around and he says, man, I'm going to do it. And what he does is he becomes that which he hates. So just as he hated those taskmasters for whipping the Hebrews, now he takes vengeance into his own hands and he becomes a violent man to the point of killing an Egyptian, taking someone's life. And though his life was spared on the Nile in an act of mercy by one of the princesses of Egypt, so he now takes one of the Egyptians' life in wrath. And you could see, the whole interesting quandary and contradictions that are going on in there, right? Moses wanted to see freedom, wanted to see life, wanted to see restoration, wanted to see justice, but he took it all into his own hands and not trusted the Lord. And so it says, the next day when Moses went out to visit his people again, he saw two Hebrew men fighting. And he says, why are you beating up your friend?" And Moses said to the one who had started the fight. And the man replied, "Who appointed you to be our prince and judge? Are you going to kill me as you killed that Egyptian yesterday?" And Moses was afraid, thinking, "Everyone knows what I did." Again, fear, right? And sure enough, Pharaoh heard what had happened, and he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to the land of Midian. He goes east coast, east side, right? Runs to the east. And now Moses tries to be he knows the people need a deliverer. And sometimes we know our families need deliverance, and we know people need deliverance. And we try to be that person, to be, in a sense, the deliverer, the redeemer. And we find that we fail ultimately, right? Instead, people point out our own problems and our own issues in life. And who are you, man? Why are you trying to play, middle person in fixing situations in our family? I mean, you're a mess too, man. Look at you. I mean, have you ever had something like that happen? Oh, man, right? And, Moses sees the need, and we sometimes see the need for deliverance, and we see the need for a mediator. But sometimes the best thing we can do is point people to God. Now, Moses probably didn't know much about God maybe at this point in his life, Yahweh, but he's gonna, and God's got a plan for him to learn. And sometimes the best thing we could do is just let people know about God and point people to God and let them know that we're trying to learn about God too and walk with God. And that takes time and learning and everything like that. But there's so many wonderful, awesome things about learning about God and learning about his son, Jesus, and, that kind of thing. So, but Moses, he gets in the middle of it. So you guys might have gotten in the middle of a mess too yourself. And people looked at you and said, "Hey man, you're no deliverer. What are you doing? You go sit back in your chair, and we'll pull out your junk as well." That kind of thing. You're like, uh-oh. So what do? We go flee, right? We run from that situation. And Moses goes to Midian, and he sits down beside a well. And now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters who came as usual to draw water and fill water troughs for their father's flocks. And some of the shepherds came and chased them away. So Moses jumped up and rescued the girls from the shepherds, and then he drew water from their flocks. And when the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked, "Why are you back so soon today?" And they share the story. "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds," they answered, "and he drew water for us and watered our flocks." Then he said, "Where is he?" And he says, "Why did you leave him there? Invite him to come and eat with us." So Moses accepts this invitation, and he settles there with them. In time, Reuel gave Moses his daughter Zipporah to be his wife. Later, she gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, for he explained, "I have been a foreigner in a foreign land." So a lot of things is happening over a lot of period of time here. It seems like we're kind of moving real fast in the narrative. But God's got a plan for Moses. Moses wants to deliver his people. We want to be helpers in people's lives. But there's things we need to learn sometimes before we get into that place of really being the helper for our loved ones. Sometimes there's times where we need to be away. We need to be separate and be away from them for maybe a time just to learn and to grow. Now, Moses runs into a crew that is pretty cool because they are the Midianites, and they were descendants of Abraham by his wife Keturah from Genesis chapter 25, 1 and 2. So isn't that cool? He runs in, he's a descendant of Levi, right, from Jacob. Well, remember, there was Abraham, there was Isaac, and there was Jacob. Well, Abraham had more than one wife, and and we see that Keturah had a family through her and Abraham, and one of them was these descendants, Jethro, or here it says Reuel, and his wife, and they have this daughter Zipporah. And so I find it very cool that God's got a plan for us, that sometimes instead of maybe rushing into being a great deliverer, sometimes we just need to learn about God. And who does God send Moses to? He sends him to a person who's a descendant of Abraham. And Abraham knew the Lord. He knew Yahweh. And so he sends Moses off on this trip to learn. Sometimes, when we're going to church just on Sundays and Wednesdays, and, maybe on another night, in a special group, men's group, women's group, whatever group we're going, or on a Zoom group or whatever it is, sometimes we're just in that process of being in Midian, being in the land of Midian, just learning and just growing, right? And seeing how God's moving in our life. And it's through that he does an amazing thing, that he's preparing us for the future, for that time of deliverance, that work that he's got for us. And so it says, years passed and the king of Egypt died, but the Israelites continued to groan under the burden of slavery, and they cried out for help, and their cry rose to God. They cried out for help, and their cry rose up to God. God is going to remember his people. He's not going to leave them. He's got a promise. One of the promises to Abraham were that they were going to be a stranger in a strange land. God promised Isaac that they would be strangers in strange land. But in both those promises, that they would be delivered and they would come back to the land of Canaan. And Jacob also received that same promise from God, that they would be strangers in a strange land for a time, but that they would be delivered. And they keep crying out for deliverance. Now, I got to tell you, just another good application is always cry out for deliverance. We don't know when God's going to do it, when it's going to happen, but we are given a promise that God will deliver us, that there will be an ultimate deliverance for all the burdens that we carry, all the pain that we go through, all the temptations that we have to fight daily, all that stuff, all the yuck, there is going to be ultimate deliverance. God, help us to trust your word that you are going to deliver us, and that just as your promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was that, hey, you will be strangers, foreigners in a foreign land. And as a Christian, you are a stranger. You are in a foreign land, I must say, because your home is really with the Lord. And yeah, Jesus, our brother Jesus Urbina, now he's with the Lord. That's where he's supposed to be. That's where we all are. Colossians chapter 3 says we're seated already in heavenly places, meaning when you gave your life to Jesus, you're already kind of in a position of hanging out with him. You are already seen by the Father as being with him in a sense, heavenly glory. So right now we are definitely foreigners, strangers in a strange land, kind of a peculiar people as Christians, right? Trusting in Jesus, wanting to serve him, wanting to obey him over everything else. Yeah, and that might ruffle feathers, of people in the land who are trying to obey Egypt. Right? People are obeying Egypt and they're listening to Egypt, but the people of Israel are listening to God. So God hears their cry. God hears our cry. He remembers his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he looks down on the people of Israel and he knows it's time to act. So good. Our God is a God of action, takes action, and will be very thorough. We went over Revelation chapter 6 a little bit yesterday at Calvary Christian Fellowship with Pastors Scott and Sean there, and that was just amazing. God is a God of action, man. That's for sure. And so, you might be in that place of feeling horrible, crying out to God, groaning, but God will be faithful to his covenant. And your faith shines as in a dark place in this world where we live in a world of faithlessness. And yet those who are in Christ are holding fast to him with everything. And that certainly shines and is a testimony, the strongest testimony in and of it itself, waiting on the Lord. So, man. What a chapter, for sure. So Moses is older now. He's got to be, 30, somewhere in there, 40, somewhere in there already. So he went through a lot of time period. and a lot of good applications for this morning. So make this chapter maybe your chapter. A lot of good stuff in here, and we will talk at you later. God bless you guys. Have a great day, okay? Bye-bye.